make a quick video and go on record because it's getting old now, and I know a lot of my coworkers in healthcare feel the same that I do. Okay, so let's just start with the hospitals fluffing the numbers about COVID. Nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists, frontline people like me, crisis intervention, emergency dispatch, none of us got into this field for money. I mean, there may be a couple, you know, like every type of business, you always have some rotten apples, but none of us, for the most part, got into it for money. And it has nothing to do with doctors getting paid more if they put a diagnosis of COVID-19. So let's get that clear for all of those conspiracy theory people that are out there. Number one, that would be fraudulent. Number two, we are finally swabbing everybody, regardless of symptoms. You were exposed, your job is requiring it, you're traveling, you're getting tested. So it's not like these doctors are turning around and saying, I'm going to put COVID here in the chart and that's the end of it. You have to have the COVID test and rule it out. That has to be proven in the chart. You have to have a chest x-ray. There has to be follow-up. And we don't even know if we're going to get paid for a lot of these things, because a lot of these things are being done under a special authorization given by the CDC and the FDA. So that right there, the fact that we're doing it because we get paid more, is not true. If anything, it's the other way around, because we're coming day in, day out with minimum protection, taking care of patients, putting ourselves out there, and having to deal with all of you that believe these conspiracy theories. And on top of that, my paycheck, I don't get COVID relief. I don't get hazard pay. None of my coworkers get that. We didn't get raises. We didn't get bonuses this year, because guess what? Most hospitals are under red. This was one of the worst fiscal years in healthcare. So no, money has nothing to do with it. And no, we're not fluffing numbers. It doesn't work that way. Patients that died of COVID, because that's the other one that people like to pull out and say, well, they're putting on the death certificate everybody COVID, even if they had a cold or upper respiratory or the flu. Again, not true. There has to be certain battery of tests before we make that decision. And when you're talking about we're getting close to 300,000 lives lost, that would be a lot of different hospitals, networks, and everything, all in a conspiracy. Everybody just deciding, oh, listen, this patient died and they had a heart attack and they arrested, but they had a little bit of a cough, so just stack COVID in there. Doesn't work like that. There has to be x-rays, there has to be COVID test, there has to be a flu swab, there has to be a whole CBC with differential for those of you that understand medical terms. And anybody that dies, especially in an ICU setting, no coroner, no doctor is gonna put just one cause of death. That's usually not how it goes to. They will have a primary chief complaint which in a lot of these patients that died is COVID-19, where the virus kind of like starts a chain reaction, and all of that has to go into a death certificate. A medical examiner cannot say the patient died of COVID-19. Boom. No, there has to be a narrative. So yes, you're going to see in there, COVID-19, and then most likely code blue, respiratory failure due to or related to COVID, or you're going to have, cardiac arrest accelerated or related to COVID. So yes, you might have 3 or 4 different complaints under your chief complaint, because most of the time when people die, it's a chain reaction. It's not just one thing. Like even when you have a heart attack or whatever, when the medical examiner sees you, chief complaint on the death certificate will say heart attack, but you're gonna have heart attack related to hypertension, heart attack related to congestive heart failure with pneumonia. Like there's a chain of events, even when people commit suicide, a lot of the times there's a full investigation by the medical examiner before they call that death a suicide. A lot of the times the patient would pass away, and the initial report under death would say, for example, self-inflicted gun wound, or self-inflicted cutting, or it'll say accidental overdose. And after they get the history and the toxicology reports and this, that, and the other, then they can go and amend what the situation is. So no, we're not fluffing and inflating the numbers. As much as a lot of people are surviving this virus, there's a lot of people that die. This is a serious illness. This is not your typical type of influenza or upper respiratory infections or pneumonia. This thing is insidious and it acts up systemically. We've had patients that had no idea, no COVID red flag symptoms, came into the hospital because they had a headache, and next thing you know, they're having a stroke and they've tested positive. We're having people with vascular issues. We're having people with symptoms that we're just finding out are related to this virus. There is already 6 documented cases of reinfection, and we thought as medical professionals, because we are learning day by day, every single day we come into work there is something new, and all we're focused is trying to get people to understand that until we listen and we are accountable and try to wear the mask, limit your activity. It doesn't even have to be for that long. And yes, at this point it is fairly out of control. But when you have leadership in any setting, it's so important. And you can fact check this. The CDC was able to, and Johns Hopkins University as well, doing contact tracing, they were able to tie not 700 COVID positive cases, okay? Let's make that distinction. 700 dead. 700 people dead tied to government rallies. It's not only that they got infected at the rally, they died. Their pre-existing condition was supporting the president. And the fact that he's still bragging that he has the biggest rallies we've ever seen, the biggest numbers, this is not a time to be bragging about this. This is a time where you should be telling your people, please support me, but stay home. Vote for me, but stay home. That's what a responsible leader would be doing right now in the middle of a pandemic. Not going like a maniac with staffers that are still positive to the virus, are not quarantining, and gathering hundreds of people at a time in the middle of cold season, strep throat season, flu season. I am sorry. I have mad respect for Republicans. I do. But I cannot respect Donald Trump. And it doesn't have to do with the pandemic. You know, this has been a chain of I don't even know what to call it. It's been a shit show. Let's just put it that way from day one. But the pandemic, it is something so serious, and we have lost so many lives that I'm sorry, I cannot get behind that. You know, when you're the commander-in-chief, you want to call yourself the commander-in-chief and take on that role, and you lose this many people under your watch, you fail. And you have healthcare professionals with a gag around our mouth because you can't handle criticism. You don't want to own up to a mistake because your silver spoon ass was taught never to admit defeat. And I'm hoping that even if he wins, that becomes his undoing. Because you failed. You failed not only as a leader, but in a human basis, on an empathy type of basis. You have no regards, no care for anybody's life outside of your own. Not your wife, not your child, nothing. You were in New Jersey when your brother died, and you couldn't cross the bridge. You stayed golfing and made a phone call while your brother was in his deathbed. I can't get behind that. I'm sorry. I just can't. That's not a leader. That's a psychopath. That's a dictator. And if people can't handle that, this nation, trust me, we're gonna lose the America we've known. This nation is not perfect. Our government has never been perfect, but it's always been a great nation in terms of liberties and in terms of your human rights and all of that. Before you know, we're going to be losing that because we sat by the sidelines and allowed this many people to lose their lives, and we didn't hold anybody accountable. And I'm not talking only about the president. I'm talking about everybody that works in the government. You take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against any enemy, foreign or domestic. And I don't care if this was your one shot at professional success. Your ethics and your morals should come first. And there was a lot of people that should have stood up to this man and say, no, you are a threat to the nation right now. You are a threat to United States civilians. And we let that happen. So guess what? That's like a toddler. He knows he got away with that. What do you think is going to happen in the next 4 years? And I'm going to close it with this. He keeps saying we're rounding the turn. It's all going to be okay. Totally under control. We're rounding the turn. Well, when you're traveling in a circle, you're always going to be rounding the turn. Have a good day.